Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to make a video detailing some of the most popular and effective team compositions in Genshin Impact as of version 3.2. I was planning on making this earlier in the fall, but it's probably better that we wait to see how broken Dendro was before doing so, and I'm glad I did because, oh boy, Dendro is something else. Shoutouts to Keqing Mains for helping me with this video, great help and always a pleasure to listen to you roast each other. Before we get started though, there's a lot of stuff I have to preface. First off, this is not a definitive guide on the best of the best or most optimal strategies. It's purely to give you a general idea of what's all the rage right now, especially since the majority of my viewers are casual players who don't delve into nor care about theory crafting but still want to stay updated on what's going on. Secondly, please understand team building is not a black and white do this or that kind of thing. For the billionth time, Genshin is a very easy game. You don't need to go hyper malding sweaty gamer to complete all the content in this game. An argument can be made for any unit to fit into any party if you're on sufficient levels of copium. So just because I don't include a character in a team doesn't mean you can't use them for that team. Conversely, just because I say X character is your best bet doesn't mean they're irreplaceable, and if you don't have them, you're out of luck. This video merely exists as a guideline to reference. Please don't take this as advice on who to pull for because ultimately every player should decide how they want to play the game and what characters they want to use. That's the fundamental basis of gacha games, to catch them all and hopefully use them all. Genshin just so happens to be casual friendly enough to where you don't have to burn thousands of dollars a month to stay competitive. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, I'm looking at you. Case in point, please don't interpret this video as law, it's just for reference. I'm sorry for spending so much time making disclaimers, but with all due respect, the Genshin community for some inexplicable reason takes things extremely literally. At the end of the day, my content is mainly for entertainment purposes, not financial advice. With that done, let's go over the 5 comps that I, and hopefully many of you, consider the strongest. I'm going to be giving a brief explanation of the team's concept, the strategy behind it, and some recommendations of who to use. Just to reiterate, this is not meant to cover every possible option, character, or team. I could honestly make a separate full-length video on each team composition. I actually might do that in the future, but anyways, let's get on with it. First, I want to touch on my 2 honorable mentions, Double Hydro and Mono Geo. Double Hydro mostly consists of using Xingqiu and Yelan in tandem with the Pyro unit to abuse the ample amounts of Hydro damage they provide. My personal favorite is Hu Tao, Xingqiu, Yelan, and Zhongli, but you can swap out Hu Tao for Xiangling or honestly any Pyro character. As for Mono Geo teams, while they've never been super dominant, are still a very fun team to try out for those who have the right characters, which I believe are Ito, Zhongli, Albedo, and Goro, though there is a Mono Geo team for Noelle too. The reason neither of them make the list was because the former is just mostly 2 characters and the latter is too niche to be applicable to the average player. So with that done, let's go through our first team, the National. The National team is a classic, still a fantastic option to this day, but not for the reasons you might think. Apparently there's like a million reasons for why it's called National, but the one I went with is that National is supposedly a slang in Chinese for anything that is commonly used by people, and I'd say that's a pretty apt way to describe it. It was founded on the basis of being easy to form regardless of if you're a whale or free to play, and that's thanks to consisting of primarily 4 stars, if not all 4 stars. The original version of the National team consisted of Xiangling, Xingqiu, Bennett, and Chongyun. Chongyun has since been phased out in exchange for Raiden Shogun to create the Raiden National team, arguably the first widely used meta party quote-unquote before stuff like Taser, Freeze, and whatnot saw more widespread use. Lately, however, higher level iterations of National do require more investment to keep up with other Tier 0 teams, but I still think it deserves a spot on account of how accessible it is. The rule of thumb is to capitalize on the overwhelming off-field pressure provided by Bennett, Xiangling, and Xingqiu. Bennett would empower everyone's attack and heal his team, subsequently buffing Xiangling's Beyblade. Pair this up with Xingqiu's Raincutter water swords and you can deal plenty of damage with just those 3 alone. As mentioned before, Shogun is the most commonly used on-fielder. Her elemental skill augments the burst of her party members, who in turn augment her own burst, all while she provides ample energy regeneration to keep the cycle going with virtually no downtime. We've also seen Child International. I don't know why they call it International, not just National, but that's friggin' semantics up in here. Basically, you swap out Xingqiu with Child and then Shogun with some other off-field support like Kazuha or Sucrose. Pragmatically speaking, so long as you have Bennett and Xiangling, you can get away with pretty much anything, which is what makes the National team so good. But when in doubt, you can always opt for the old-fashioned Raiden National, or if you don't have her, then pretty much any on-fielder who capitalizes on Xingqiu's Rain Swords and Bennett's attack boost. If you're looking for more reaction damage, there's Kazuha and Sucrose. If you want to keep everyone stuck in one place, you can use Venti. More survival, then Zhongli. Ultimately, if you're trying for a non-5-star National, there's always Bennett, Xiangling, Sucrose, and Xingqiu. You can always swap in 5 stars as you see fit. It's a very flexible team and will probably never fall out of relevance for how easy it is, even if it's not as amazing anymore now that we have new broken comps. Speaking of broken comps, let's talk about the new kid on the block. Dendro's wasted no time altering our perceptions of what units are better than others because, my god, Quicken and Bloom respectively are tearing through everything right now, and it's doing that despite us not having a very extensive Dendro roster. To start, There's no particular name for Dendro teams. Zajef came up with a bunch of weird names like curry, salad, fridge, but I think he's just hungry, so for the time being we'll just go with Dendro. Catalyzed reactions, aka Quicken, rely on applying as many instances of Electro and Dendro as humanly possible, tapping into Aggravate and spreads penchant for quantity over quality. This means anyone who can deal rapid Electro and Dendro damage are your characters of choice. For starters, the unequivocal best unit for Catalyzed is Fischl, whose off-field Electro application is second to none. You can also use Sucrose and Kosaha to commandeer Electro for further supplementation. As for Dendro, your options are the only ones we have available. Dendro Traveler, Nahida, and Tignati can be used interchangeably since there's no specific unit who needs to be on field for this to work. But obviously Nahida is your best choice, although DMC isn't that far off. Keqing, Sino, and Miko are also worth trying out if you have a soft spot for any of them. Hyper Bloom is kind of the opposite, where you want to try to be as consistent as possible with Dendro, Hydro, and Electro chaining, but not too fast to where you accidentally trigger Quicken by pairing Electro and Dendro, though that's not really a bad thing per se. Obviously this requires a bit more team building due to 3 elements being used instead of just 2. If we're talking the best choices, you'll definitely want Xingqiu on your team followed by either Shinobu or Shogun for Electro. By the way, in this team, Shogun is actually not supposed to use her elemental burst, she's purely there for her skill. Well, technically you can use her burst, but that's not the focal point, unlike Raiden National. If you don't feel like using Xingqiu, you can also play around with Yelan, Kokomi, and Ayato. Anyone who can readily deal Hydro damage is fine. If you don't have Nahida, you can also use DMC. Everyone has Traveler. I hope. As for Electro, you can also make use of Beidou. Dendro is just insanely overpowered right now, especially with Nahida. To give you an idea just how amazing it is, both Hyper Bloom and Catalyzed teams can flex in a completely random unit that has nothing to do with the composition and it will still function well, so if you want, you can just toss in Zhongli and call it a day. Speaking of which, before we continue, I'd just like to remind everyone that you're always free to mix and match different characters to see what fits your playstyle the best, even if they may not be the most optimal. If I were to go over every single possibility, this video would be 74 hours long, maybe even longer. Regardless, let's move on to the next team. The next one on the list is gonna be Freeze, potentially the most straightforward team composition out of all of them. I say straightforward in the sense that there's no rotations, no specific combo or timing or anything. It's the easiest team to use in my opinion, though that doesn't detract from how stupidly good it is. Unlike the other 4 teams, Freeze's notoriety doesn't stem from how much damage it does. In fact, it does no extra damage at all, not directly at least. Pairing up Hydro and Cryo on the same team will cause them to be frozen for a few seconds, being unable to move or do anything for that duration. This is as broken as it sounds. Cryo units are categorically known for having skills or bursts that last a very long time, consistently applying cryo in a large area. Then of course Hydro is one of the easiest companion elements to react off of by way of Xingqiu, Yelan, and Kokomi. Simply put, you need 2 things, Hydro and Cryo. I guess you can throw an Animo by extension since it can be either or. The majority of players who run Freeze teams feature Ayaka or Ganyu as a starting unit, but if you don't have either, you can honestly make do with Cryo off-field and Electro to proc Superconduct, which does cryo damage at base. You can basically pull this off with any cryo user who isn't Eula, hence why it's so easy. But the reason Ayaka and Ganyu carry this team is mostly due to them having very high base damage. Freeze doesn't offer any follow-up damage boost, all it does is keep your enemies stuck in place and unable to attack. Without either of those 2, you're taking a pretty significant hit in DPS. Then again, the only place that matters is Spiral Abyss. Outside of that, it doesn't matter if you take 5 minutes to kill something or 5 hours, enemies won't be able to hit you back anyway. Naturally, there is a weakness to this composition. Most bosses are unable to be frozen under any circumstance, so your greatest asset being crowd control is all but irrelevant. It is a situational composition, but a damn good one at that. So long as you have Ayaka or Ganyu and a supplementary cryo like Diona, Shunhua, or Rosaria, you can basically AFK your way through the entire game. Hands down my favorite team for how brainless it is. Up next, we have the good old Taser comp. Taser's gone through the most amount of variants out of any team on this list I think. The name originates from the act of electrocuting all enemies in your way by pairing up Hydro and Electro to achieve Electro Charge, as well as general damage, so that's going to be your base. The original Taser composition featured Sucrose, Xingqiu, Fischl, and some other Electro unit. Most people went Beidou. But typically, the only obligatory units are Sucrose and Fischl. You can have your pick of the litter with Hydro and your 4th slot. Humorously, the Taser party is what made Sucrose one of the best supports in the game because everyone realized she does so much damage despite serving as a driver of the team, to the point where she ends up being your on-field damage dealer anyway. By absorbing Electro, she does more Electro work for her team than the Electro units themselves. Fischl's use is self-explanatory. Out of all of the cast members, she does the best at applying Electro, at times more than even Shogun. By this point, you've likely realized that your choice of Hydro is basically one of the holy trinity of Hydro units, Xingqiu, Yelan, or Kokomi. If you want max damage amp, there's Yelan. If you want to turn on infinite HP hacks, there's Kokomi. Or if you want super armor and the balance of attack and defense, go with Xingqiu. Either way, they're all proficient at applying Hydro. By the way, Kazuha and Venti can run their own taser teams too, since they do more or less the same job as Sucrose, just not as efficiently. As for your last party slot, any extra electro helps make things more consistent, so Yaemiko, Shogun, Veido, so on and so forth. Most on-field electros like Sino and Keqing aren't that efficient for tasers since you need to rotate a lot, so they don't get that much free time. Now there is a taser variant that for some reason has a different name called the Fireworks team, specifically Child Fireworks, where instead of Shinto, Kokomi, or Yelan, you have Child as your Hydro dealer. Speaking of Child, I don't know why his names are always different. Child International instead of National, and then Child Fireworks instead of Taser. One last thing, you guys are going to see this video several weeks after it's made. I believe I have the date set for November 3rd. Scaramouche, aka Wanderer, is likely to come out very soon, and we know he's an Animo unit. Personally, I don't pay attention to leaks, but there are rumors circulating discussion boards that he gets really involved in taser comps, so keep that in mind. And finally we arrive at the last team. Just to repeat, this is not in any particular order. Soup is now number 1, it's just the last one on the list. Honestly, the names are getting more absurd by the day. Okay, so Soup is essentially Taser, but with Pyro added. Taser's Electro, Hydro, Animo, and Soup is Electro, Hydro, Animo, and Pyro. The origin of the name is stupid but also kinda funny. It's literally a reaction soup. What you need is a giant pot. Venti, Kazuha, Sucrose, anyone who can trap enemies in place. Then, and I'm not even joking, you spam the crap out of your Hydro, Electro, Pyro characters, just throw everything together like a soup. I'm not certain if there's any set rotation of bursts you should go for, just as long as you get the reactions off as often as possible. You'll be pulling off Vaporize, Overload, Electrocharge, Swirl, everything else in between. So this is pretty much the only team composition that uses all 4 slots for a set purpose. Most people opted for a familiar soup based Official and Sucrose, then they toss in Kokomi for Hydro and then Xiangling for Pyro. Chances are you've heard of the team named Sukokomon. That's one of the most well-known soup teams out there. Another well-known soup team features Ayato, Official, Bennett, and Venti. That's one of the best ways to use them. In actuality, your only quota is to meet the 4 separate elements and then make sure your Animo character is able to trap them all together. After that, you can kind of play with whatever units you want. Soup teams are basically an extension of taser teams, though instead of maximizing electro damage, you maximize everything damage. In my opinion, I think Venti is more comfy at pulling off a soup team than Sucrose, since its elemental burst actively holds enemies in a set area, which makes it more soupy than Sucrose, whose burst is more like tossing a salad. I can't believe I'm playing along with the name. You get the idea. Despite requiring 4 distinct elements, it's another very flexible composition, and once again, you're free to decide who your on-fielder is. Most people end up defaulting to Sucrose or Sukokomon or Ayato for Ayato soup. Just make sure you have a healer in case you're not running Kokomi. And that's about it. I know there's a lot of other teams I could have mentioned, but like I said, if that happened, we'd be here forever. By the way, for those who are wondering why I made everything sound so vague, it's because I don't want to give off the impression that you need to have certain characters. Genshin allows players to try whoever they please. If they don't enjoy using a certain character or have a special attachment to one, they're able to do so. Also, you may have noticed there's a lot of recurring characters like Sucrose, Kokomi, and Official. That's because they're overpowered, plain and simple. Lastly, the reason I didn't include any physical damage teams is because, I'm sorry, but physical damage is just... I should make another video on physical units at this point. It's sad to see them so neglected like this. Anyways, feel free to share your favorite party in the comments down below, as well as what you call it. I'm interested in hearing what funny names you came up for them. For now though, if you guys enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Genshin videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.